This is Reef Blower, the second ever episode of Spongebob that was aired in 1999, and since then has held the title of the shortest episode ever made in Spongebob. Also, there's literally no dialogue. The episode starts with Squidward walking out of his house all smiley and happy until he sees his flower slanted, so he fixes it and he's happy again. Then we get a shot of his yard looking all clean except for this little shell, so he decides to just kick it over to Spongebob's front yard, acting all nonchalant. What's crazy is that without Squidward saying a single word, we understood exactly what he was feeling and his motivation for this episode. Squidward wants his front yard to be clean so he can be happy, and we learn that in about 10 seconds. It's simple, but it sets up the foundation for the rest of the episode. Anyway, Squidward's about to get his karma hard because this is the first ever episode that introduces Squidward torture. So SpongeBob sticks his body out of his window, and I guess he's also a clean freak in this episode, so the shell makes him tweak out, and he gets an idea. And let me just say, not hearing these guys speak is odd. Not hearing SpongeBob's after seeing the show just feels so wrong. SpongeBob is a certified yapper. I've never heard him so quiet. So SpongeBob slides around his house on the ground and heads into his garage and brings out his huge reef blower just to clean up a little shell. While he's doing this, Squidward is just chilling on his hammock after being an evil neighbor, no care in the world. But he gets angry hearing SpongeBob's loud reef blower, so he puts earplugs in his head. I mean, I don't see any ears. Does Squidward even have ears? This is how Squidward would look with ears. Beautiful, right? Anyway, SpongeBob seems to have no experience with his reef blower because this thing is just dragging him around, but he gets to the shell and blows it, but it just goes up and falls right back in place. So SpongeBob angrily blows it again, and it goes right back in place. SpongeBob is now real angry, so he blows it harder and ends up blowing the sand instead. And we see Squidward, who I guess has ADHD, because now he's just sitting outside at a table eating some green slop and also does not have his earplugs. And as Squidward goes to take a bite, all that sand SpongeBob blowed falls straight onto him, covering him all in it. SpongeBob actually feels bad as we see him visibly look guilty, and he comes over to Squidward to help. So he blows all the sand off, but Squidward is still upset and shows this to SpongeBob by looking down at his food that is now ruined by sand. So SpongeBob blows the sand off his food, and it gets in Squidward's eyes, so he blows his eyes off. SpongeBob truthfully tried his best. Honestly, this is Squidward's fault. Why is he eating outside? He has an entire dining room. But because of SpongeBob helping Squidward, there's now a huge pile of sand in his yard. And this is where the whole no dialogue thing kind of gets suspicious, because SpongeBob points to the sand, and we get a caption that says, "You," which makes me feel like this episode didn't really want to be a no dialogue episode, but had no choice. But we will get to that later. So SpongeBob walks over to the sand pile to show it who's boss, smacks his reef blower into reverse, and sucks up the sand. And finally, everyone is happy. Both houses are clean. Psych. The reef blower cannot handle the sand, and it takes a literal sand crab, making SpongeBob's front yard still a mess. SpongeBob does not take defeat though, and he spins his reef blower like a fidget spinner and puts it down, opens a zipper, and it coughs. What? So he takes the sand and stuffs it into the poor reef blower, who I now think is actually alive. Kind of freaky. SpongeBob zips the reef blower back up, and everything is solved, right? Well, the reef blower won't turn back on, which I don't know why it needed to. SpongeBob got what he needed to get, but the writers didn't yet. There's still not enough Squidward torture. So SpongeBob grabs a starter cord and starts running with it. And real quick, where is Squidward? He's literally nowhere to be seen. Can you see him? I can't. Anyway, SpongeBob runs to the middle of butt cheek nowhere, lets go of the cord, and then rides on it back, and almost causes an accident. But the reef blower starts back up, and we see Squidward again, who was sitting in front of his door all defeated and depressed. Did he really just come back outside to just sit here depressed? Or was he always here and the animator just got lazy? I don't know. The reef blower though got so much power from SpongeBob's long cord pull that it literally sucks up all the water in Bikini Bottom, and Squidward cannot breathe and almost dies. Actually, he might have died. His eyes did become X's, but SpongeBob's reef blower cannot handle all the water and it explodes. RIP the reef blower. He did not deserve that. The explosion leaves all of Bikini Bottom a mess, except for SpongeBob's house. And SpongeBob does not care, and is just happy that his house is finally clean. Surprisingly too, Squidward is not mad. He just looks defeated and over it. And this episode ends after 2 minutes and 50 seconds. This episode was definitely different, but in a good way. I want to start by analyzing the Squidward torture aspect. This was the blueprint for Squidward torture. I mean, it was the first ever episode to try it, and they actually did it perfect. SpongeBob never purposely tortured Squidward, and to be honest, the torture was kind of Squidward's fault. If it wasn't for him throwing that shell in SpongeBob's yard, none of this would have happened. The torture was karma for him, and I like that. It never feels like a show was purposely torturing Squidward just to get some laughs. And for SpongeBob, all he wanted was to clean his front yard, but he had no idea how to use the reef blower. And even when accidentally covering Squidward in sand, he cared and ran to his rescue. It's so crazy to me that the first ever Squidward torture episode was done this perfect, while also having no dialogue. The torture was funny, It was well deserved, never felt too over the top, and felt like genuine bad luck. Besides the torture, this episode felt like something out of an old cartoon, like Tom and Jerry. I love how familiar and nostalgic it feels. It makes my heart feel happy. Miming is such a difficult art form, and they nailed it. I understood everything that was going on, and never felt confused, which is very impressive. The expressions were also absolutely perfect. This episode showed that sometimes less can be more. I'm not going to sit here and act like this is the best episode ever, but it's a great episode for what it is. This episode completely disregarded the entire formula of SpongeBob. There was no dialogue. The entire episode took place in one scene, and it was only 2 minutes. And even with all of that, I still found myself hooked to this episode. Having no dialogue in this episode actually made the episode more interesting, because it had to add more. It's like if you lose your hearing, your other senses heighten. I know that's a stupid example, but I feel it explains what I'm saying. Pretty much because they had no dialogue, they had to make sure it was more interesting and engaging than a regular episode. There was always something new happening. That's why I blame Square for having ADHD, because this episode needed to have ADHD because of lack of dialogue. There was conflict after conflict, funny moments after funny moments. I mean, they gave life to a literal reef blower because SpongeBob walked away for 1 second. This episode just never gets boring. And this may be some overthinking, but I think this is the exact reason SpongeBob did not just walk to the garage. Him sliding made things more interesting. Walking would have been normal and boring, and a no dialogue episode can't risk that. Same with Squidward in the beginning, having a flower next to him to fix when walking out of his house, and SpongeBob popping himself out of the window to look at the show. Just unusual things to make up for the lack of dialogue. Finally, I will now answer the question, why was there no dialogue? Well, people at first just assumed that Nickelodeon was having technical difficulties with audio, so they were forced to make an episode without audio. Well, while this kinda makes sense, it also doesn't. When you realize Squidward whistled, gurred, gasped, and made some straining sounds. But that doesn't even matter, because the real reason was actually explained. So Jay Lender, the storyboard artist for this episode, came out and stated that Reef Blower was actually just a short filler to add to Help Wanted. And because of how short Reef Blower was, it wasn't worth the money to voice act the entire thing and pay that session fee. This is crazy too, because this tweet came out in 2022. So for 23 years, people just kept up this rumor that they had technical difficulties. I mean, you can still find Reddit posts talking about how this episode had to be completely rewritten, and supposedly that Squidward was screaming into the microphone too loud and it broke or something, and that's why it was silent. People even attempted to find the lost audio of this episode that never even existed. Some interesting SpongeBob fan lore, to be honest. This episode was a masterpiece though, and that's surprising for an episode that was only made as a filler so they could air Help Wanted. The classic SpongeBob team just cooked no matter what. It's so impressive. But yeah, source episode SpongeBob, source episode SpongeBob, source episode SpongeBob, source episode SpongeBob is the second episode, but 1B technically is the second episode. Still, wait, hold up. This is the shortest episode of SpongeBob.